Hey, so I wanted to share some visuals today about some things I have talked about in the past, but I'm pretty sure that this might bring up something new because it tends to do that. So let's just say that if you're on a path straight up, this is the path that you are being your true self. Let's say you never deviate from this path, then you are your true self right now. And there is no human that has this path, right? That's not the point. The point is not to have a non-deviant, completely true, straight and narrow path. Losing your way and finding your way back is part of the human story. So um, this is the ideal that no one ever achieves because that's not human, right? So what are people doing instead? They have some kind of ego, they're living some sort of life that's unfulfilling, they're not doing their spiritual mission, they don't know who they are, they don't know what they want, they don't know what they should do next. They did everything that their parents told them to do and society told them to do, and they're unhappy, right? So you have this false self that is deviant, you're deviated from your true self, you're on a different path. So this is pretty much everyone, correct? Like this is the human story, is you lost your way. That's why we have like, parables like the prodigal son, like things that resonate with us is people getting lost and finding themselves again. That is the core of almost any hero's journey. All right. So something I talk about a lot, which is ego death. We can map that on here. So if you are this far along your false self path and you're really unhappy and probably physically ill and definitely spiritually just bad, you have to have an ego death to come back to the line of your true self. Does this make sense to you? Like an ego death is literally you adjusting from this path to the original path, the path that you deviated from because of your mind. So either you are like this or you know people like this, or you at least know what I'm talking about. The kind of person who's probably really good at obeying their parents and going to a good school and having a successful career and just kind of plugging themselves into society in a way that they thought was okay. And maybe they even get married and have kids. They're like, okay, so I did everything that I thought would make me happy. And yet I feel a deep sense of emptiness inside. Okay. If you're there, then it takes an ego death to come back here. And everything you've accumulated along the way, everything I've talked about, things like whatever you get from that education, perhaps, whatever you get from that relationship, perhaps, or even the family you've created, whatever you get from that, that's your false self. That's your false self. So an ego death requires a letting go of those things. And what does ego death mean? I mean, obviously we could talk about that for a really long time, but something I want to highlight about ego death is letting something die, like letting a relationship die, letting a false idea you had of something die. I often think of ego as something like the pluck of a harp string. So the harp string is plucked, right? And it makes a sound. It makes one kind of sound that should have a beginning, middle, and end. But if that plucked harp string sound decides that it doesn't want to die, it doesn't want an end, it's going to artificially do weird things to keep itself alive. So if you pluck a harp string, like the sound should only last for so long naturally, right? But an ego is something that's lasting an unnaturally long period of time. So it's like a harp string that got plucked 4 years ago. You can still hear the sound now because it doesn't want to die. So it's here, artificially keeping itself alive, way past its natural utility. It's weird. It's like a molecule in a stream that doesn't want to go along with the stream. So just like seizes up and hangs back, and therefore creates an element of unusual weirdness in the stream. The stream becomes weird and unnatural. It goes against nature. A harp string sound that is 4 years old or 4 years long, that's still going, goes towards immortality, right? That's very unnatural. And yet that's everyone's ego. Your ego is almost by definition unnatural. I mean, you can look at it a different way. Is it natural for us to have egos? Yes, just like I said, it's natural for the human to have this kind of story. That's natural. But the other way of looking at natural is things lasting as long as they have utility, right? And not lasting beyond that, or allowing a natural death to occur. Just like if you just leave something on the floor in the jungle, depending on the kind of jungle, it may not even be there tomorrow. Like the disintegration is so rapid. Bugs can come and get pieces of it. It's just like gone in an hour, or it can just decompose through other means. That's natural. Recycling is natural. Okay, so this means you're feeding a false idea of who you think you are, your own personal life force energy, and that's your ego. And that ego needs to die in order for you to go back to your true self path. This does not mean, I hear this is so weird. People are like, oh, I need to kill my ego. Like, what are you talking about? What are you even talking about? You want to murder? You want to murder some idea of yourself? No, it's like literally letting go. It's just placing that banana peel on the floor in the jungle and saying goodbye to it. You don't have to kill it. Does this make sense? You don't have to do anything vicious to anything. You just need to allow the natural order of things to occur, because your ego in and of itself is going against the natural order of things. It's the molecule of water in the stream that's like, that's unnatural. It's the harp string sound going, lasting for 4 years. That's unnatural. What would it take for that harp string sound to die? Let go, because it's already dead. Okay, so I want to point out that the longer you are your false self and the stronger your false self becomes, the stronger your ego becomes. And I have to say this because sometimes people get really confused. Your false self and your ego, that doesn't necessarily mean you're egotistical. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a raging narcissist. Most people's egos identify as a victim. But since the ego lies, a lot of times people act like the victim, masturbate the feeling of being a victim, through their shadow create circumstances in their lives where they are the victim, like literally like people steal from you, or even like touch you inappropriately, like do things where you're clearly the victim. But you're creating those circumstances through the victim energy in your shadow. And because your ego doesn't like to think it's the victim, you're like, I'm working on myself. I healed that already. What are you talking about? I'm not a victim, So your ego lies. So there's an aspect of you that like just gets off on being a victim, but you don't want to think that you're a victim. And in fact, you want to think that you conquered a lot of stuff by doing your healing work. This is a lot of people. So when you are very strongly your false self, when you are very strongly in your ego, you most likely do not think of yourself as a narcissist, and you most likely do not think of yourself as egotistical. You probably act like a victim without realizing it. That's most people. And the further along this false path you go on, the ego death, singular, or the ego deaths, plural, required for you to go back to your true self, get bigger and bigger and bigger, and your ego gets more and more scared to die. That makes sense, right? I think this makes this. I think this is hitting with certain people. I can feel it. So it's like the longer you've done the thing. I mean, how many have you been in like a romantic relationship, let's say for 8 years? It was dead 6 years ago. you got comfortable and you don't want it to die, right? Or you were at a job, or you were in a city, or you got into something with your mom. Like so many people, their mom had some kind of traumatic relationship with them when they were little. And then they grow up and they become adults and they go to talk therapy or something like that. And then they forgive their mom so that they can have a relationship with their mom. And they're very proud of the fact that they've healed shit with their mom, but their mom's changed very little. Even if their mom has changed, it's very little compared to how much this person has changed in order to uphold this now healed relationship. It's not really that healed, but this person's very proud of this kind of thing. A lot of people are like this, and they're really proud of where they are at now with their mom versus the traumatic stuff that happened when they were a child. The thing is, they don't really like to acknowledge that they're still giving more life force energy to their mom and their mom's entities and their mom's narcissism, and their mom's refusal to really heal herself. This adult who thinks they're on a healing path and is really proud of where they're at with their mom, they're giving a lot of their life force energy to keep this relationship alive when it might be irreparable. So if you're clinging on to that, you're like, no, I can't imagine this lifetime of mine, without some kind of talking on the phone relationship with my mom. Look at how far we've come. If you're in that kind of place, you're really stuck on this false path, refusing to see the irreparability of the relationship with the mom. And it requires such a big ego death to go back to your true self, where if you really loved yourself, you wouldn't have that relationship. Even if it's your biological mom, most people I see who are extraordinarily gifted, extraordinarily, like out of this world, powerful, usually have really bad human circumstances. They might have been born, let's say, socioeconomically privileged, and they have had a good education, but their parents were unbelievably abusive, like out of this world. Like you wouldn't even believe it because the abuse is so incredibly bad. So that's what I see. There's a high correlation with intense abuse, intense trauma, and really gifted people. So if if you want to be here and you love yourself, and that might be your circumstance, you probably wouldn't have a relationship with that kind of person because they're an entity. Okay, that went there. Okay, so I'm just going to conclude with one thing. If you go really, really far down the path of your true self, and as you can see, the longer you are wait, what did I just say? Whatever I just said, I probably meant to say false self. Getting a little confused now, which means maybe possibly mild psychic attack, which is interesting. That's interesting. I'll just say that usually when you're confused, that's a type of psychic attack. And a lot of people are confused all the time. So like if you ask them, like, what do you want? What are your boundaries? They don't know, And if you ask someone even something like, hey, where do you want to meet up for lunch? Like, I don't know. Where do you want to meet up for lunch? This like inability to know what their real desire is, their lack of being in touch with themselves. A lot of times there's some kind of entity activity involved. So I wanted to say that went like 2 degrees out from whatever I'm talking about here, but whatever. The longer you're your false self, you've been your false self for like decades, the more entrenched you are being your false self, the more you're like, no, this is good. It's good. I talk on the phone with my not very, very healed, abusive mom, this kind of person. Like I'm very proud of where I'm at with my mom. Having a relationship with her is really important to me. Then you're saying you want to be your false self until you die. Like that's where your spiritual growth ends, because you can't grow from there. That is you accepting the evil of your false self. Your false self is necessarily evil because it's unnatural. It's not who you are. So it's like a baby panda growing up with antelopes, thinking it's an antelope and trying its darndest to be an antelope and always failing and using a lot of life force energy trying to be an antelope, but it will never succeed except if it were to just allow itself to be a panda again, that's a whole other story. It would gain life force energy. It would have a longer, more fulfilled and more healthy life. And they would be, this is a weird example, more spiritually fulfilled. The panda would be more spiritually fulfilled than if it were trying to be that antelope. And if you are giving up your life force energy to an entity, an entitized human, then you're saying yes to evil. And you are preferring to be on the side of evil as opposed to your true self, who is naturally, you could say naturally good. Good and evil are weird concepts, but you could say naturally good. So you, very, very far from your true self, that difference is evil. Does that make sense? This difference is evil. So when you're younger and your false self is not as strong, there's less evil in your system that you're accepting. The older you get and the stronger your false self becomes, and the more you think that's who you are, the more evil you become. And you know, a lot of people think of babies as like these gifts from God because they have very little evil, because they just don't know, you know, even if they lie, right? Like a newborn baby, they don't know how to lie, but maybe a slightly older baby, even if they lie, they don't really know what they're doing, right? They're kind of playing, you know what I mean? And it's only when they're older that when they lie, they're really lying. Like they're really trying to deceive you and they're trying to get away with something and winning points off of the deception, right? So like the older you are, the more evil that lie becomes. A 40-year-old lying on purpose is more deceptive and more evil, more of a con artist quality than a 4-year-old lying. That's more forgivable because they don't really know what they're doing, right? The 4-year-old is like down here, right? The 40-year-old is somewhere along this path. And what I'm saying is the more you want to be your false self, which is fine, you're allowed to do whatever you want in your lifetime. It's your life, you know, but the more you want to be your false self, the more you're accepting evil as a part of how you live. And there's going to be a lot of evil that your ego accepts. There's going to be a lot of evil in your shadow that you just deal with, and it might come out as physical disease and a lot of unhappiness with where you are at in life. And you're going to have a very high tolerance for it. Like you won't feel it as bad as someone else who suddenly got switched into your life. Like someone who's on their true path, if you force them to go to a false path, it would feel really gross to them, right? But someone who's already on a false path, you just make them stay the same, it won't feel gross to them. In fact, going to the true path feels scary, and they might be so entrenched in their ego that going to their true path itself might seem evil to them. Okay? Remember, confusion, entities. So when you are more evil, you're so confused that oftentimes you think bad is good and good is bad. That's a whole other topic. All right, so I hope this was clear enough. I hope the visuals helped. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Bye.